Hey guys, this is John and I'm playing vperboy in the 15-minute pool on ICC. Let me check this player's stats before I decide on my first move. 90 games played, 65 wins, 20 losses. Decent 5-minute rating too, 2347. Let's play e4. I'm trying to play this move more often. Wouldn't say I'm an expert in it yet, although I used to play it. I played e4 as my only weapon as white up till the time I was about 2300. And let's go knight f3. If knight c6, I'll play a Roy Lopez, bishop b5. No Philidor. Okay, let's play d4 against that. So if black takes this pawn, white has a choice between knight takes and queen takes. Many players play knight d7 here, though, just to defend e5. Knight f6 is also playable. It counterattacks the pawn on e4. We'll just play knight c3 and defend that pawn. So this player presumably is pretty good in shorter time controls as well, with a 23:55-minute rating. So we'll probably have a tough match on our hands here. Yeah, knight bd7. This is the Hanham Philidor. I'll play bishop c4. So black can play bishop e7 now and get ready to castle. I remember I had the position after bishop e7 one time in a scholastic tournament when I was maybe 6th or 7th grade. And I took on f7 with check. But after king takes knight g5 check, even though white gets in knight e6 on the next move, it's not so good. So it's better just to castle here. And black will castle or play c6. Probably more likely they just castle. And there are a few different setups white can choose after that. I might start with rook e1. Rook e1's a flexible and good move. Just defending the e4 pawn again. If black plays c6, I'll play a4, which rules out b5. And normally black will try to develop their position like queen to c7, pawn to b6, pawn to a6, bishop b7, and then eventual b5. So they'll try to advance on the queen side. One thing I've learned in this line is that as white, it's not a bad idea to play d5 right when they play b6 to try to induce an exchange on c6 or on d5. I just want to make sure I get the timing right if I'm going to play that way. So I could withdraw the bishop, play bishop a2. That takes the bishop off the c-file so that if d5, c takes d5 is played, black would not have queen takes c4. I might even be able to take with the knight. But I also kind of want to play h3 here, just so my bishop can settle on e3 without any issue. h3 is a constructive move, prevents knight g4. So if I play h3 and black goes b6 and I go d5, and they take my pawn, I guess I could even take with the knight there. After queen takes c4, I have knight takes e7. Yeah, let's play it that way in this case. So the plan is if b6, we're going to play this d5 move. Black could advance past and play c5 and try to keep the position closed, but normally they play to open it a bit. Okay, an a5, so clamping down on the b4 square. I don't often see this way of playing. Not that that means it's automatically bad, but this deprives black of the opportunity to play b5, potentially. So several candidate moves here. Just bishop e3 would be consistent. Knight h4 comes to mind, looking to get in knight f5. That would be a great outpost for my knight. The knight is on an undefended square if I play knight h4. I'd have to check if knight takes e4 is a concern. I could take with a rook and defend that knight. Maybe they can play d5, but bishop takes d5 looks good. So knight h4 appears safe. They could play e takes d4, but I might even jump into f5 then. Or even just queen takes. It's possible on knight h4 that black will play e takes d4, let's say queen takes d4, and then knight c5. And if knight f5, then bishop takes f5. That could be okay for them. So knight h4 is a possibility still. There's that bishop e3 move, as I was saying. If bishop e3, I wonder if knight takes e4 is something I have to be concerned about. Idea knight takes e4, d5, kind of a center fork trick. I could withdraw my bishop, just play bishop a2. A lot of times this bishop will get hit standing in the center, so bringing it back to a2 is plausible. I might do that just to see how black reacts. So now I've kind of narrowed it down between bishop a2 and knight h4. I don't think I like bishop e3 as much. Yeah, I'll play bishop a2. The safer of the two moves, but it's useful in many cases to have that bishop defended and out of the way. Bishops are long-range pieces, so they don't need to stand in the center to have influence, unlike knights typically. Okay, and black does take. I thought they might try this. So I can take either way, queen takes or knight takes. Knight takes would be more natural because you want to get your knight operating in the middle of the board. And also knight f5 could be coming, but black will play knight c5 almost certainly, and they'll cover that f5 square. Take it with the queen is kind of attractive because after, say, knight c5, I could play bishop f4 and then get a rook over to d1, although they can put a piece on e6 pretty quick too. I think I'll take with the knight. Just not sure about queen takes d4, knight c5. I think black's going to play knight c5 here anyways. No rook e8. First thing I look at after rook e8 is whether bishop takes f7 works. Bishop takes f7, king takes f7, and knight e6, but that's just too crazy. Sometimes you have tactics like that. Safe to say black is just preparing bishop f8. So if I play knight f5 here, they'll probably withdraw the bishop to that square. And then maybe bishop f4. Attacking d6. They could play knight e5 in that case. Seems reasonable for black. Hard to pass up the opportunity to play knight f5 with tempo on the bishop. Knight f5, bishop f8. Bishop f4, knight e5. Everything is secure for black at the moment. What about knight f5, bishop f8, bishop g5? That looks awkward for black because then they wouldn't be able to move this knight without allowing bishop takes f6. Maybe I'll do that. All right, here we come in with the knight. I'm down a little bit of time, but I think I have a promising position to work with, so I'm not concerned. It's raining really hard outside right now. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's coming down in buckets immediately outside my window. So now we'll do this. e4 is defended twice by my knight and my rook. So knight takes e4 doesn't work. So this is a move to develop, but also restrict, because I'm trying to restrict this knight from moving. And he instantly plays h6. So taking doesn't make a lot of sense based on my assessment. I could just play bishop h4. I think I will. They might play g6 to try to back my knight off. But g6 creates some weaknesses too. I don't know how happy black is about that move. But this knight and my bishop have an oppressive effect on the king side. So I think it's natural for black to want to look to get rid of one of those pieces. And g5 is much riskier than g6, even though g6 weakens some stuff too. Queen b6, so attacking the pawn on b2. Could I gambit that pawn? So if, let's say black gets another move and plays queen takes b2, they'd be attacking this knight. But if I could play like queen f3 right here, let's say, queen takes b2, even a move like bishop b3 then, and that queen is shut out from the play, it's on the verge of getting trapped. But queen f3, one thing I would have to reckon with is knight e5, attacking the queen. Queen f3, knight e5, queen g3, knight h5 maybe. Knight takes h6 check. That feels good for me, but it's murky. Rook b1 might just be the simple move. Simply defend the pawn and ask black how they're going to complete their development. Let's do that. As I've said many times in these 15-minute games, and the more 15-minute games I play, the more it's impressed upon me. In rapid time controls, you have to be willing to make practical decisions. It's often just not worth spending several minutes on a line that feels good but is committal. you have to be willing to make some tough calls and maybe even bypass opportunities that you'd prefer to spend more time on, just in the interests of the clock. So queen c5. Don't know that that helps black very much. I guess they're introducing knight takes e4 as an idea, because this knight might be undefended. And they could play queen takes f5. Still tempted to play queen f3. Queen f3, knight e5, knight takes h6, check. And if pawn takes, I have queen takes f6. I believe that wins material. I don't see any tricks black has there. Bishop e7, queen takes h6. So if queen f3, knight e5, knight takes h6, check, what happens if black moves the king? Like, say, king h7? It's a tougher question. I'm not sure about that line. Queen f3, knight e5, knight takes h6, king h7. If queen g3, probably knight h5, attacking my queen. I have queen g5 then. Queen g3, could they take with the king on h6? They probably could. Looks bad, but maybe they can. So bear in mind that this is a threat. Knight takes e4. Is it, though? Queen g4 after that? Or even knight takes h6? I can't decide if knight takes e4 is something to be concerned about. I'm kind of leaning towards no, it's not. But what do I play in the meantime? Maybe king h1? Just get my king out of the way. Rook e3 comes to mind, lifting the rook. Maybe rook e3. Trying to go rook g3. If rook e3, g6, rook g3, I have pressure on this pawn. Okay, let's go with that. We're at 5 minutes and 20 seconds. It's time to move. He's been moving so quick that he hasn't given me a lot of downtime to think on his move. But I think this position is still tough for black. So my hope is that they're going to burn some time just trying to figure out what to do, extricate themselves. Queen b4, just getting in closer with the queen. Strange moves. So rook g3 is what I'm thinking. Rook g3, knight takes e4, knight takes h6, check. That just, that looks very dangerous for black. Yeah, I'm going to play it. I'm not sure what queen b4 is about. I mean, it attacks e4 again, but it also frees up the c5 square, but this seems to allow me to shift my rook into attacking position. So if knight takes e4, knight takes h6, check, king h7, it's going to get a little hairy, but I gotta feel this is good. d5, so just allowing knight takes h6, check. Also allowing just take. So now I have to decide between good options. Knight takes h6, king moves somewhere, I take f7. That's got to be strong. Yeah, I'm just going to do that, because taking on d5 is also possible, but check. I see this way just gets me 2 pawns and an attack. It rips open black's king. They can take e4 to try to get one of the pawns back, but I can take with my knight, and then always I'll have knight g5 on the horizon. d4 played quickly. Okay, so knight g5 check. Or bishop takes f6, probably knight g5. Knight g5, they'd have to go to h8. I'm so close to being able to mate them. Bishop takes f6, there's knight takes f6. Could just withdraw this knight, too. Knight g5, king h8. I want to get my queen over to the H file. Let's give a check here first. I'm expecting king H8. And then after king H8, let's say knight E2. So I'll just move my attack knight. And if knight takes E4, even a move like knight F4 could be just dangerous there. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Let's do that. A4 is hanging. They could take with their queen, but I mean, the theater of action is the king side for sure. If queen takes here, I'll probably just play bishop B3. Black has wasted a lot of time with the queen. There's also bishop F7. Bishop F7 followed by knight F4 just looks good. Now let's do this instead. Keep it simple. Gain a tempo on the queen. So knight F4, knight E5, knight F7 check, king H7, bishop takes F6 is going to decide. So bring up another piece. Join the attack. 3 minutes left, but my position is overwhelming now. Black has played 5 queen moves. G6, I can just take that with check. I don't see how that's going to help them in the slightest. Knight E6 check could be played. That just wins material. There's also, I'm sure, knight takes F8.
Check.
Let's just do this one. It's going to win the rook for a knight. And I keep discoveries. Knight E5 check is coming. If king H7, probably just bishop takes D7. And then if knight takes, my queen comes to H5. That will be the end very soon. Just trying to play a little faster. I don't want to have a catastrophic loss on time. Okay, so we're just harvesting the material now. I mean, Black played this like a blitz game, and they're paying the price. I just don't really think you can play a proper 15-minute game with that time management they're displaying here. I know I harp on time management all the time, but it's the truth. So now our queen is x-raying that king on H7. I think knight E5 is good. Yeah, let's go knight E5. So threatening stuff like queen F7, also threatening the bishop. If bishop E8, I think just queen F5 check is going to win. We've always got this rook in reserve, if needed. Okay, yeah, check here. Yeah, and they'd have to block on G6, moreover, to make matters worse. They didn't even have king. I thought they had king H8 for a second, but my bishop obviously covers that square.
Checkmate.
That's mate. All right, well, a pretty baffling game as far as Black's play is concerned, because it's almost like they showed no regard for their king safety. I think at least right around here after bishop G5, right around here, if I'm Black, I'm spending some time trying to mount defense, but Black just started playing, honestly, somewhat nonsensical queen moves. I'm not going to say their position's easy, but Black can try to organize a defense with a move like G6. As played, I was able to bring up all my pieces into attacking position. And it was pretty easy. Clock was the only thing I had to concern myself with. So let's go back and have a look. So against the Philidor, D6, D4 is a good reaction. Since Black has no knight on C6, they don't have as much central influence. And if Black takes on D4, you can compare this position to a Sicilian, an open Sicilian. The only difference is that Black's pawn's on C7 rather than E7. So Black only has one center pawn. They kind of have a small center. This is playable for black, though. I've faced this many times. One popular line is knight f6, knight c3, and then just bishop e7. And here white has a wide choice of moves, mostly depending upon where to put these bishops. I remember a game I played against international master Levan Altunian, where I went bishop f4 followed by queen d2 and castled long, whereas black castled short, and it was double-edged. The game ended actually in a pretty quick draw. So instead, black plays knight f6. I played knight c3 and then knight bd7. I believe in this position, Alexei Shirov many years ago played the move g4 as a gambit, inviting knight takes g4. This is an option I forgot about during the game against vperboy, but it's a nice stab with the g-pawn that is playable. But bishop c4 is the overwhelming, most popular move. And black plays bishop e7. So this scholastic game I mentioned went bishop takes f7, king takes f7, knight g5 check. This appears pretty nice for white because if black plays king here or king here, they're just going to lose to knight e6, either to a fork with check or, in the case of king e8, knight e6, the queen is trapped. However, after king g8, knight e6, the queen can flee to e8. And it's true that black will lose the rook in the corner. But after knight takes c7, queen g6, knight takes a8, queen takes g2, black gets a ton of play. For the moment, white is up 3 points of material, as you can see here. But this is not a position that white should mess around with, let me tell you. This rook will have to move, and I don't remember exactly how the line goes, but I think black does something like take, and then here, and they have ideas with this, and also bishop h3. It could be a little bit different from this, but suffice it to say, I don't think white should sacrifice on f7. That's not a good idea. So I just castled, black castled, rook e1, c6 common, and a4. Good prophylaxis against b5. I want to stop black from gaining space. So I think this is a popular position. If you were to look this up in the database, you'd find many, many games from here. And I debated a little bit about what to play. I think h3 is fine. The other moves I was considering were bishop a2, and I think I mentioned knight h4 as well, trying to come into f5, but h3 is good. Controls g4, makes luft for the king, so in the future I don't have to worry about any back rank threats. And this plan with a5 I'm not sure about. In most of the games I've seen in this line, black plays b6, bishop b7, a6, and b5 instead. So perhaps that's better. Let's just turn on the engine and see what the engine has to say. Yeah, b6 is the engine's choice, and I think for white it's good to play this move if you can, as a reaction to b6. Try to force black to change the pawn structure. Because if this happens, white has almost like a Benoni type formation, or black does with these pawns, but black is pretty cramped, and I think white's a lot better here. It almost looks like a d-pawn opening now. If they take, white can probably take either way on d5, bishop or knight. And I mentioned that even this was playable probably, because if queen takes here, take check. Maybe bishop takes is even better, because this would be a nice situation for white, forking the queen and the bishop. I think white's knight on d5 will promise some advantage. Yeah, and this bishop, even though I played h3 to rule out knight g4, this bishop, you'll often play b3 and then send it to, for instance, a3, because that would be a good way to bear down on this backward d-pawn. But black played a5, and I spent a little more time figuring out how to react to that. I spent, 2 minutes? And I played bishop a2. I had that same set of candidate moves as the previous move. So knight h4, bishop e3, bishop a2. Knight h4 is the most aggressive. I just wasn't sure. Maybe black can just play to cover the f5 square. They could probably just take too. Take and then play like knight c5 and have the bishop cover. And if black's going to take on d4, like I might just want my knight here so I can recapture with that piece, as I did in the game. So bishop a2 is kind of in a similar vein as h3. It's a constructive waiting move. You guys know I love those type of moves. Moves that you can play and you don't have to have a concrete purpose, like, winning material or trying to unleash an attack. They're just moves that are going to help you down the line. Like h3, as I said, it gives you luft for the king. It stops a knight from coming into g4. Bishop a2, you withdraw a exposed piece. This bishop on c4, it's undefended, to a defended square. And as I was saying in the game, bishops don't have to be in the center to have an influence on the position. Knights tend to. Like, if this were a knight on a2, it would be a bad piece. But a bishop on a2 still has this long diagonal. It still has a lot of influence on every square on this diagonal. So bishops are often better just kind of hanging out on the sides of the board. That's why you see so many openings involving fianchettos. So black took, knight takes. I think black just has to do a little better job figuring out a scheme against this. I mean, unless black has had this exact position before, they should spend some time and try to figure out how best to get their pieces out. Because black is more cramped, and the consequences of them choosing a wrong setup are going to be higher than if I choose a slightly wrong setup here as white. So e takes, knight takes, and now I'm ready for knight f5. I thought knight c5 would be played to cover that square. And then I probably would have done something like bishop f4, maybe queen f3, but I kind of like the look of bishop f4, just attacking that d6 pawn. Black might shoot the queen out to b6 all the same. It's a game. I think this knight is going to be decently posted on c5. That's one aspect of a5. It rules out me playing b4 to chase the knight with my pawn. So if black can play knight c5 and introduce their light square bishop to the equation, then they have a chance for a decent game. But as played, they made a couple inaccuracies, and suddenly I had a ton of pressure. Knight f5. The engine says black should just allow me to take that dark square bishop. Black should play knight c5, allowing knight takes e7, which I probably would have played. Queen takes and just try to play this position. Bishop f4, rook d8. The bishop pair is significant, but maybe if black can play bishop e6 and offer to swap, it's not so bad for them. So this is what I mean. Like, black has to think a little bit more precisely, more concretely here, versus just playing an autopilot move like bishop f8, because I think pretty soon it gets unpleasant for them. h6, that move makes sense. And the point of bishop g5, once again, is to threaten bishop takes f6. So in effect, I'm tying this knight down, because I really doubt they'd want to allow something like that. Or maybe there's even a more accurate way to do it, like knight h6. Deflect the pawn and then take here. And black's king side is wrecked. So h6, bishop here. Yeah, g6. That's the move that I thought should be played. So boot the knight from f5. Such knights, when they're outposted in your position, particularly when they're close to your king, that should be a red flag for you. Usually you can't tolerate a knight like that in the long run. So I was surprised that black didn't play this move. I don't know what I would have done against it, because knight g3 defends this but runs into g5 and my bishop is trapped. In knight e3, I see the engine likes that, but I would have to look at what happens if knight takes e4. Actually, this might be a good quiz question for you guys. I won't play the move next, but if knight takes e4, how would white play in reply? Try to calculate a line. Okay, so I think the reason why the engine likes knight takes, or knight e3, is that if knight takes e4, I can swap and then play bishop takes f7.
Check.
At least that's what I thought. Idea being take queen
Check.
f3, forking the king and the rook. But maybe there's more to it. King g7 could be played. Okay. And then I actually have both bishops under attack. But even better is rook takes e4, knight g4. And despite being down a pawn, white has a fearsome attack. So I'm threatening the rook.
Check.
If they take, we take. What am I getting at here? Queen e8 maybe? Going after f7. Note the influence of the bishop on a2. Also, if this knight ever moves, knight f6 check is a big problem. Yeah, the engine just believes in white's attack. Interesting. So, nevertheless, g6 probably should be played. I think black has to try to expel this knight from f5, otherwise they're in for some pain. So here's where black started making these queen moves. Oh, could I just have taken on d6? I like my knight on f5 so much I didn't realize that d6 was hanging. Okay, so if that happens, what happens if they take here? Just queen back. And white is significantly better, probably still due to the bishop pair. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, even when I get a quick win, sometimes I just miss stuff, as you can see here. Didn't consider knight takes d6. In some respects, this is similar to some mistakes I've made recently with pawns, where a pawn will be defended one move, and then on the very next move when my opponent undefends it, they're no longer defending the pawn, I just miss the opportunity to take it. And even if it's not good to do so, I still like kind of kick myself when that happens because that's just an oversight. Yeah, so knight takes d6 was possible. I don't know, though. I keep a big advantage after rook b1. I like this knight on f5. I could cash in and win a pawn, but there's something to be said for leaving it there, too. Okay, so that explains why they played queen c5, just defending d6. And here I played rook e3, getting the rook into the attack. I really wanted to play queen f3, because this introduces shots like knight takes h6, pawn takes, and then bishop takes f6. But what was I not sure about here? I think this was the move I was somewhat unsure about. And it looks kind of crazy.
Check.
Knight takes h6, but king h7, and I have pieces hanging. The knight on h6 and my queen on f3 is attacked. Best is this move. Knight g6, queen d2, knight takes h4, knight takes f7. Somehow the engine thinks this works out to a draw. Knight g6, check. King h8. That's a total engine line. But that concerned me at the time. That's why I didn't play queen f3, because I didn't like that king h7 reply. And also there's this, isn't there? Queen f4, knight h5. Was another move I thought. Queen g5, still trying to attack this. Bishop e7. Queen takes h5, g6. Queen back to e2, just fleeing. Bishop takes h4, and this knight still has issues. Knight g4, bishop takes g4, h takes g4, king g7. And black is down a pawn, but their dark square control makes up for it, more than makes up for it. Note that I can't play g3 to kick this bishop out because they just take it. Look at that strong queen on c5, pinning my f-pawn to my king. So their plan from here might be just like rook h8 and try to get something going down the file towards my king. Yeah, I don't like this position, even though I'm up a pawn. So my sense of danger was kicking in a little bit after queen f3 in my calculations. So that's why I played rook e3 instead. Queen d2 is another suggestion of the engine. And what if knight takes e4? Probably just take it and then take d6. Get the pawn back.
Check.
They can trade rooks, but once again, white's bishops have a lot of say here to the tune of plus almost 4.5 for white. Wow. There's an attack on f7 and black's queen's under attack. Take, and the engine just says black's busted here. Hard to dispute that. They never got developed. So rook e3. One line I did think about was knight takes e4 here. And I thought of a couple different things. I think I mentioned knight takes h6. I thought this would be a good solution. That's a desperado. So after knight takes e4, black is threatening queen takes f5. So a desperado is when you know you're going to lose a piece, and your opponent also has a hanging piece. So you try to get as much material for the piece that you know will be lost as you can. So before I go to take this knight, which I guess I could play even here, although I would lose f5, I can take d6, kind of by analogy with the last one. Actually, that's pretty good because e8 would be hanging. But just to illustrate the desperado point,
check.
Knight takes h6, and I get a key pawn and also expose black's king before I capture the knight on e4, as opposed to just taking on f5 straight away, even though that was also good. So knight takes e4 doesn't work out for black. Yeah, and he's got 12.5 minutes here and spent, 15 seconds? Not even on this next move. Oh, actually, okay. Yeah, he spent 22 seconds on this next move, playing queen b4, but still not enough time. It's still defensible. The engine says g5. I thought maybe g6 also would be considered. If black plays a precise defensive move here, I mean, I do have far less time than my opponent, and even though my position is promising, that time is going to perhaps even equalize the situation. But yeah, they got to invest it. They got to find a solution to the position. Queen b4 just allows me to continue my plan that I started with on the previous move, lift the rook into attacking position. Now I'm bearing down on the king, and knight takes h6 is a threat. And it was pretty much a massacre from here. The engine likes king h8, but that would lose the f7 pawn at the very least. Wants to do something like, whoops, give up the exchange. Yeah, not fun for black. And let's just quickly see if black had anything
Check.
after this. Knight takes f7. They play d4. So they could take on e4, like with the pawn or the knight. But I can always play knight g5. Queen d2 is also strong, according to the computer. Wonder what the purpose of queen d2 is. Setting up for some mating idea? I don't know. It's just hard for black to move, even. And I'm still up a pawn. +8. e3, queen
Check.
d3 check. Yeah, that's bad. That's very bad. Black has no moves, apparently. Now, one idea is queen g5 and queen g6. If queen c5, bishop takes f6, knight takes, queen f4. Yeah. Further improving the queen, getting it into an attacking position. Now knight g5 check, king h8, queen h4 check would be the threat. And this bishop that I retreated to a2 way back on move 10, you see the effect it had on the position. It's making its presence felt on the king side. That g8 square is always a no-go zone for black. So my opponent played d4,
Check.
and I was pretty sure there were multiple good moves. Like, as you can see, the engine finds something pretty brutal, e5. Idea, d takes c3, just take here. And now I'm gearing up for this. And I assume if queen here, taking is strong. Bishop takes, rook g4. Yeah, pretty much every tactic is going to work out for white. If queen h5, rook
Check.
takes g7 with the discovery on the queen. But it's not even worth looking at a move like e5 when you have this amount of time left.
Check.
Knight g5 was straightforward and strong. And then just move the attack knight. And I'm getting ready for knight f4 to g6. If knight takes e4, I think I was just going to play knight f4 anyways. Because even though my rook is under attack,
checkmate.
That's a mate right there. Look how the minor pieces coordinate to cover all these squares the king can go to. Also, can't forget about that bishop. So, too many pieces coming down on black's king. Here I played bishop b3, just attack the queen. And that buys me time to play knight f4 on the next move.
Check.
Yeah, and this is all
Check.
over. Getting into force mate territory. And, okay, so if you have this situation in your game, you're going through your game, and you see that you missed a mate in 8. I missed a mate in 8 starting with queen f3. Don't even bat an eyelid. You know, don't worry about that at all. Bishop takes d7 wins more material. If knight takes, I get queen h5 check in, or even knight takes f8. It's not important that you miss a mate in 8 here when you're already like plus 20 or 30. Don't lose any sleep over that. Yeah, nothing doing for black.
Check. Checkmate.
Okay, so a nice attacking game. I liked how this one went. I wish I would have seen knight takes d6. That's, I think, the only thing I kind of regret about my play. I didn't make that adjustment in my head when black played queen b6. And not like knight takes d6 won anything, because b2 is hanging, but I wish I would have seen that move. But other than that, I liked my play. Maybe could have been stronger at parts, but, you know, it's hard to play a perfect 15-minute game. And I think the big lesson on this one, once again, is use your time. The time is there to be used, and you shouldn't play a slightly longer time control game if you're not going to use the time. So, no offense to you, vperboy, if you're watching this, but you know, you're not going to improve unless you make a conscious effort to utilize the time you have available. So, thank you guys for watching, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another video. Talk to you guys later. Bye.